Picture it, the golden age of Hollywood. Stars shining so brightly that they seem to live on a different plane, untouchable, perfect, beyond the reach of ordinary mortals. Their faces graced magazines, their voices filled radio waves, and their images loomed larger than life on the silver screen. Yet what if I told you the reality behind those sparkling smiles and smooth, tailored suits was nothing like the flawless facade? What if those movie icons you adored, whose lives you admired from a distance, were hiding some of the most shocking hygiene habits imaginable? Would that change how you see them? Let's peel back the curtain and uncover the dirty secrets that studio publicists worked overtime to conceal. From foul breath to body odor so potent it could clear a film set, these legendary stars led lives that were nothing like the polished images they sold to the public. Their dirty little secrets remained hidden for decades, but today, we're going to reveal them. We're diving into the lives of 15 Hollywood icons whose private hygiene habits were as disastrous as they were legendary. Let's start with Clark Gable, the king himself, the man who made hearts flutter with just a smile. Gable, with his chiseled jaw and magnetic presence, ruled Hollywood for decades. But behind that iconic smile, a dirty secret lingered. By the time he was in his early 30s, Gable had lost most of his natural teeth to a severe case of periodontitis, a painful gum infection. To fix the problem, he had nearly all his teeth removed and replaced with dentures. But these were no high-tech prosthetics. Gable's dentures were ill-fitting, uncomfortable, and worst of all, he had chronic bad breath. Imagine sharing a romantic scene with someone you idolized, only to find yourself backing away because the smell was so overpowering. His co-stars dreaded working with him up close, and even Sophia Loren, his leading lady in It Started in Naples, requested that their scenes be kept at a distance. And what did Gable think of all this? He refused to use mouthwash or breath mints, convinced they'd affect his acting. His breath became so infamous that even his star power couldn't shield him from the whispers on set. Then there's Joan Crawford, beautiful, fierce, and meticulous about her appearance, except when it came to her teeth. Crawford had an obsession with enhancing her looks through cosmetic procedures, but the results were less than glamorous. After having dental work to create more pronounced cheekbones, things went horribly wrong. Her teeth shifted, causing painful gum infections and an ever-expanding upper lip, which became a signature part of her look. Despite her flawless makeup, her dental hygiene was in shambles, leaving her with breath problems that only worsened as she got older. And her perfectionism in every other aspect of her life didn't help. While she scrubbed her hands raw and insisted her homes be spotless, her mouth was a different story. On set, rumors swirled about the state of her breath, especially when she'd had a drink. Even the most dedicated fans of Crawford would have been shocked to know just how much she struggled in this department. Next up, Marilyn Monroe, the bombshell who defined an era with her iconic blonde hair and sultry looks. But behind the camera, Monroe's hygiene habits were far from glamorous. According to multiple sources, including her co-star, Clark Gable, Monroe was, shall we say, not exactly meticulous about her personal care. She rarely bathed, didn't use deodorant, and often went without undergarments. Her makeup artist, Whitey Snyder, was a pro at creating her flawless look. But he also had a secret weapon, baby wipes and strong powder, which he kept on hand to freshen her up between takes. Despite being the epitome of Hollywood beauty, Monroe's personal hygiene was, to put it bluntly, a mess. Now, let's talk about Howard Hughes, an aviation mogul, film producer, and once-upon-a-time ladies' man. Hughes was known for his impeccable grooming, but that changed dramatically as he grew older. His battle with obsessive-compulsive disorder, OCD, spiraled into an unhealthy obsession with cleanliness. He refused to bathe for months, wore tissue boxes on his feet instead of shoes, and developed disturbing hygiene rituals. The man who once dated some of the most famous women in Hollywood eventually turned into a recluse, living in a hotel room surrounded by jars of his own urine. Meanwhile, his standards for the women he dated? Impossible. If a woman had even the slightest imperfection, Hughes would refuse to even touch her. The man who lived in squalor had an unattainable idea of perfection for others. Then there's Errol Flynn, the swashbuckling heartthrob known for his athleticism and charm. But what audiences didn't know was that Flynn's personal hygiene, particularly in his later years, left much to be desired. His excessive drinking began to take a toll, not just on his health, but on his scent. Co-stars reported that his body odor became overwhelming, his sweat reeking of alcohol. And Flynn didn't make it any better by wearing the same clothes for days at a time. The dashing hero who once scaled castle walls on screen was becoming a man whose habits, disheveled and slovenly, were no longer fitting of the silver screen. These stories are more than just shocking. They highlight the massive gap between Hollywood's manufactured perfection and the messy, real lives of the stars who lived in it. They show that even the most glamorous icons had flaws, quirks, and secrets that we never saw. But that's what makes them human, right? So, the next time you watch one of these classics, just remember, the stars on the screen weren't always as perfect as they seemed. Behind the scenes, they were just like everyone else, dealing with personal struggles and secrets they'd rather keep hidden. And maybe, just maybe, that makes them a little more relatable. After all, nobody's perfect. Not even Hollywood legends. Imagine stepping onto the set of a grand Hollywood production in the 1930s, where stars like Errol Flynn and Clark Gable commanded the screen with their unmatched charisma. The glitz, the glam, the larger-than-life personas, they were everything. But behind those carefully crafted public images, well, that's a different story. What if I told you that some of the brightest stars in Tinseltown's history weren't so pristine when the cameras were off? Their hygiene, in many cases, was less Hollywood perfect and more, well, memorable for all the wrong reasons. Take Errol Flynn, for example. The man who swashbuckled his way into the hearts of millions had a reputation that extended beyond the screen. Flynn's off-screen habits, particularly his hygiene, were so challenging that wardrobe departments had to come up with clever solutions just to keep him presentable. It became a norm to add extra panels to his costumes so they could be cleaned on the fly without ruining their on-screen appearance. Can you imagine that? A movie star so memorable in his scent that they had to design clothes with built-in cleaning features. It's a far cry from the starched collars and perfectly pressed suits we imagine. And let's not forget his co-star Olivia de Havilland, who, while always professional, was known to gently nudge him toward a little mouthwash between takes to save both their dignity. Even the legends of Hollywood had to navigate these messy human moments, though few spoke up about it openly. Then there's Marlon Brando, the man whose revolutionary acting changed the very essence of film. But as his career soared, so did his indifference to Hollywood's traditional standards of personal grooming. By the time he worked on Apocalypse Now, his hygiene had become as legendary as his talent, and not in a good way. The film crew had to endure more than just his complex acting methods. They had to contend with an actor whose body odor was described as overpowering. Brando, with his rebellious spirit, seemed to let his personal hygiene slip as a rejection of Hollywood norms. This wasn't just a matter of laziness. It was an intentional pushback against an industry obsessed with perfection. And it all started early in his career. Even during A Streetcar Named Desire, the film that catapulted him to stardom, Brando had to be repeatedly reminded to bathe more often, with his co-star Vivien Leigh visibly disturbed by his odor during their intimate scenes. Let's talk about James Dean, the epitome of rebellion. Known for his brooding, I don't care attitude, Dean's approach to personal hygiene was an extension of his larger-than-life persona. On the set of Rebel Without a Cause, his hygiene issues were so noticeable that director Nicholas Ray had to pull him aside multiple times. Co-star Natalie Wood found herself struggling during their romantic scenes not because of their chemistry, but because of Dean's body odor. What's even more interesting is that Dean's poor hygiene wasn't just teenage rebellion. It was also tied to his early life in New York, where his apartment had unreliable hot water. As he became famous, his bad habits stuck, and the actor who embodied the spirit of the 1950s youth rebellion also embodied a personal defiance against cleanliness. And then there's Judy Garland, one of Hollywood's most beloved figures, whose real-life struggles were often hidden behind the bright lights of her career. Garland's personal hygiene deteriorated over time, especially as she battled with depression, addiction, and the immense pressure from the studio system. While she could look immaculate on her good days, on her bad days when the weight of her substance use and emotional strain took hold, her hygiene became another casualty. There were days when her hair would remain unwashed and her breath would be heavy with alcohol and cigarettes. For those around her, it wasn't just about managing her career, it was about managing her self-care. One of the most tragic things about Garland's hygiene issues is that they were a direct result of the overwhelming pressures she faced, both personally and professionally. By the 1960s, as Hollywood stars were given more freedom and the old studio system faded away, the contradictions between public image and personal reality became even more apparent. Take Elvis Presley, for example. The king of rock and roll, adored for his charm, his voice, and his swagger, yet he struggled with basic hygiene. His breath became notoriously bad, and his dental health, tied to his growing dependence on prescription drugs, deteriorated. While his hair was always meticulously styled, his teeth and breath were another story altogether. Co-stars like Marianne Mobley openly discussed how unpleasant it was to kiss him on screen, not because of his lack of talent, but because of his poor dental hygiene. As the king's health spiraled downward in the 1970s, so did his personal care, leading to a disconnect between the Elvis his fans adored and the man he was behind closed doors. Even Elizabeth Taylor, whose violet eyes and stunning beauty defined her era, struggled with hygiene during personal crises, particularly during her turbulent relationship with Richard Burton. During the filming of Cleopatra, one of Hollywood's most expensive productions, the Italian crew reportedly found the American standards of hygiene lacking. There were times when Taylor's personal care, or lack thereof, was a stark contrast to the flawless public image she maintained, highlighting the complex reality behind her glamorous facade. These stories might surprise you, but they remind us that even the stars we hold in the highest esteem were at their core just as human as the rest of us. They had their flaws, their struggles, and yes, their hygiene issues. It's easy to idolize these icons, but perhaps it's more meaningful to see them as real people, fighting their own battles behind the scenes while the world watches their every move. So, the next time you watch one of their movies, remember, the images we see on screen are not always the full story. In fact, sometimes the real story is hidden just out of sight, behind the lights, the glamour, and the legends. Hollywood's golden era is often seen through rose-colored glasses, an era of elegance, charisma, and near-perfect stars who dazzled on and off the screen. But peel back that glimmering surface, and the truth isn't always as glamorous as it seems. Behind the perfectly pressed suits, stunning makeup, and sparkling smiles, the private lives of some of Hollywood's biggest stars were far from pristine. In fact, their hygiene habits often left much to be desired, and those secrets were carefully hidden from the public eye. But today we're lifting the veil on some of these Hollywood icons and their rather fragrant truths. Let's start with the legendary Elizabeth Taylor, an actress whose violet eyes and timeless beauty captured the world's attention. But while she maintained an impeccable public image, her personal hygiene sometimes took a back seat during periods of emotional turmoil. During happy and stable times, Taylor was known for her meticulous self-care. But when things weren't going so well, like in the wake of tumultuous relationships, her hygiene took a dive. Makeup artists who worked with her in the 1960s noticed she would often go days without bathing, relying heavily on perfume and powder to mask any body odor. Joseph L. Mankiewicz, who directed her in Cleopatra, 1963, and Suddenly Last Summer, 1959, even devised a diplomatic strategy to address her hygiene issues. Instead of confronting her directly, he'd arranged for a female assistant to casually mention that a hot bath had been prepared for her during breaks. A subtle way to keep things fresh without causing any embarrassment. Then there's Charlie Chaplin, the man who brought the iconic tramp character to life. His on-screen persona, with its ragged clothes and messy hair, was a symbol of charm and resilience, but behind the scenes, Chaplin's own personal cleanliness could be questionable. His second wife, Lita Gray, claimed in divorce papers that Chaplin's hygiene was consistently poor during their marriage. Though some of her claims were likely exaggerated for dramatic effect, other reports confirmed that his bathing habits could be irregular, especially when he was engrossed in a film project. Despite these issues, Chaplin's star power made him irreplaceable. and his status meant that studio executives were reluctant to press him on his personal habits. Humphrey Bogart, the quintessential tough guy of film noir, had his own ahem challenges with hygiene. Known for his distinctive voice and rugged masculinity, Bogart's smoking and drinking habits had a notorious effect on his breath. Co-stars, particularly those in romantic scenes, had a tough time dealing with his foul breath, a result of years of chain smoking and minimal dental care. Ingrid Bergman, who starred with him in Casablanca, 1942, reportedly asked the director to limit the number of close-up shots with Bogart due to his overpowering breath. As his health worsened, so did his dental problems, making intimate scenes even harder to film. Yet, despite these issues, Bogart's star power and undeniable charm allowed him to maintain his place as one of Hollywood's most iconic figures. Rita Hayworth, the fiery redhead who defined elegance and beauty on screen, was known for her glamorous looks, but behind the scenes, she faced some serious challenges with her hygiene, stemming from painful cosmetic procedures. In the early stages of her career, the studio had her undergo an electrolysis procedure to raise her hairline, a painful process that left her scalp permanently damaged. The harsh chemicals used in her hair dye only aggravated the issue, resulting in a chronic scalp condition. While makeup artists worked tirelessly to conceal the flakes and keep her hair in perfect shape, Hayworth's condition was a constant challenge on set. Then we have Montgomery Clift, whose sensitive performances made him a beloved star in the 1950s. But after a car accident in 1956 that left him with severe facial injuries, Clift's personal care began to deteriorate. His physical and mental health were in decline, and so was his ability to maintain the Hollywood standards of cleanliness. By the time he filmed The Misfits, 1961, Clift's hygiene had become a concern for the production crew. His clothes would often show signs of being worn for days, and his appearance required more than just makeup to mask the damage to his face. It required a careful handling of his personal hygiene. What makes Clift's story especially heartbreaking is that his hygiene issues were a direct result of the trauma he endured, reflecting the toll it took on both his body and his soul. But perhaps the most outrageous of all is Tallulah Bankhead Hollywood's wild child. Known for her flamboyant personality and larger-than-life presence, Bankhead was infamous for her rebellious attitude towards social norms, including hygiene. Her excessive partying, drinking, and drug use resulted in her going days without bathing, a habit she embraced as part of her eccentric persona. She famously declared, "I'm as pure as the driven slush," and saw no reason to conform to the conventions of personal cleanliness. By the time she filmed Die, Die, My Darling, 1965, Bankhead's hygiene was an even bigger issue, but she remained unbothered, seeing it as a rejection of societal expectations. These stories are just a glimpse into the hidden lives of Hollywood legends. Behind the camera, some of the most iconic stars of all time struggled with their personal hygiene, and the studio system worked hard to keep these truths from the public. But today, we're pulling back the curtain to reveal that even the most glamorous stars were just as human as the rest of us. They had their flaws, their battles, and their moments of imperfection, and it turns out sometimes those flaws really stink. If you found these revelations surprising, hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more shocking secrets from Hollywood's golden age. Drop a comment below with the hygiene horror that shocked you the most, or let us know which star you'd like us to dive into next. Remember, the truth doesn't just stink, it reeks. See you in the next video, where we continue uncovering the secrets the studios didn't want you to know.